Have you had this feeling lately? You're scrolling online or you see a headline and you think, here we go again. A comedian tells a joke and a firestorm erupts. A company releases an ad and it's pulled within hours after a backlash. A public figure's decade-old tweets resurface and their career is suddenly on the line. It feels like we're all walking on eggshells, like the line for what's considered offensive is constantly moving, and the consequences for crossing it are more severe than ever. It's easy to dismiss this as snowflakes being too sensitive, or on the other side, as people finally being held accountable. But the truth is more complicated. This isn't just in your head. Something fundamental has changed in our society. The question is why? Why does it feel like everyone, everywhere, is suddenly getting offended? To understand what's happening, we first need to get a sense of the scale. The term cancel culture has gone from a niche phrase to something almost everyone recognizes. In 2020, a Pew Research survey found that 44% of Americans were familiar with the term. Just 2 years later, that number jumped to 61%. That's a massive increase in awareness, driven by major news stories and public debate. And this isn't just talk. It has very real, very high-stakes consequences. Take the 2025 Academy Awards. The film Emilia Perez was a critical darling, nominated for a staggering 13 Oscars. Its lead actress, Carla Sofia Gascon, made history as the first openly transgender woman nominated for Best Actress. It was supposed to be a triumphant moment. But then the internet did what it does best. It dug up old posts. Offensive tweets from Gascon resurfaced containing derogatory comments about George Floyd and Islam. The backlash was immediate and brutal.
Little fact for you, Nora uses the F word 479 times. That's 3 more than the record set by Carla Sofia Gascon's publicist. You tweeted what?
Gascon was quietly removed from the film's Oscar campaign. The film, which commentator Bill Maher said was on track to win Best Picture, suddenly stalled. It went home with only 2 of its 13 nominations. A potential historic victory was derailed by past offenses. This story shows how potent public outrage has become. But what's fueling that outrage? The biggest, most obvious engine is sitting in your pocket. Social media platforms are not neutral town squares. They are businesses built on an outrage economy. Their algorithms are designed to do one thing: maximize your engagement. And they've learned that nothing keeps us glued to our screens quite like anger. Think about it. A calm, nuanced post gets a polite nod. A post that makes you furious gets a comment, a share, an angry emoji. Research has found that posts using language about outgroups, people or views we dislike, are 67% more likely to be shared. These platforms create feedback loops. The algorithm feeds you content that confirms your biases and stokes your emotions, which makes you engage more, which tells the algorithm to feed you more of the same. It creates an illusion of constant crisis and amplifies fringe voices until they sound like a majority. One of Twitter's own co-founders famously compared the retweet button to handing a 4-year-old a loaded weapon. He was right. It allows outrage to spread instantly, often without thought or context. But blaming it all on Mark Zuckerberg or Jack Dorsey is too simple. The technology is an accelerant, but the fuel was already there. We need to look deeper into our history and our psychology. First, let's talk about the nature of offense itself. Psychologists say it often stems from a perceived blow to our self-image or to a value we hold dear. This can be a personal insult, a moral violation, or an attack on our group identity, our race, religion, gender, or nationality. Past trauma or low self-esteem can make us more sensitive, creating a defensive why me lens where we interpret things as a personal attack, even if they weren't intended that way. But our individual psychology is layered on top of massive social shifts. For decades, the long arc of history has been bending toward a greater emphasis on individual rights and equality. The civil rights movement, feminism, and LGBTQ+ rights movements have all contributed to a reevaluation of our language and social norms. This led to the rise of what we call identity politics. There's a growing awareness of how language and power dynamics can harm historically marginalized groups. A joke that might have been considered harmless 30 years ago is now viewed through a different lens. a lens that recognizes the existence of systemic inequality and microaggressions. For many, especially younger generations who grew up with this awareness, calling out offensive behavior isn't about being overly sensitive, it's a matter of social justice. They see it as a necessary tool for creating a more inclusive society. Critics, however, often see it as an overcorrection, a form of hypersensitivity that stifles free speech. This clash of worldviews is at the heart of the woke debate. So you have this perfect storm, a technology that rewards outrage colliding with a genuine generational and ideological shift, and a heightened focus on group identity. This new landscape is also full of contradictions and misperceptions. For example, who actually feels silenced by cancel culture? The answer depends on where you stand. Research from scholar Pippin Norris shows that in Western societies, where liberal values often dominate academia and the media, it's right-leaning individuals who are more likely to report feeling a chilly climate. But in countries with more traditional moral values, it's liberal scholars who are more likely to feel silenced. It seems feeling canceled is often about perceiving your views to be in the minority within your specific community. This environment is also fertile ground for old stereotypes to get a modern makeover. Take the anti-Semitic trope that Jews control the media. A shocking 2024 survey found that while 92% of American Jews identify this statement as anti-Semitic, nearly a third of the general public, 30%, does not. Some have tried to pin cancel culture on a Jewish media conspiracy, but a 5-year study from the University of California found zero statistical evidence for this. The forces driving these cultural shifts are decentralized and complex, not the work of some shadowy cabal. Yet the canard persists because it's a simple, convenient scapegoat for a phenomenon people find confusing and threatening. There's also a big difference between online anger and offline reality. The outrage you see trending on social media often represents a vocal minority, not a broad public consensus. It's an outrage bubble that can distort our perception of what people actually care about. When you put all these pieces together, you start to see the same pattern playing out everywhere. In comedy, you have the Matt Rife Netflix special. He opened with a joke about domestic violence, and the backlash was huge. His response? A sarcastic, dismissive non-apology that only fanned the flames. It's a perfect case of a comedian testing the new boundaries of humor and finding out exactly where they are. On college campuses, there were at least 120 major cancel culture incidents in 2024 alone. Pro-Palestinian protests were accused of anti-Semitism. Conservative speakers were disinvited for being transphobic. Student displays were vandalized. Campuses have become battlegrounds for competing ideas of safety and free speech. Even major corporations get it wrong. In 2019, Dior launched a campaign for its Sauvage fragrance featuring Native American imagery. The French word sauvage can mean wild, but it's also historically been used as a racial slur, equivalent to savage. Despite consulting with indigenous groups, the ad was seen as a tone-deaf disaster and was pulled almost immediately. So why is everyone suddenly getting offended? The answer isn't simple. It's not that we've all become weaker or more fragile. It's that the very ground beneath our feet has shifted. First, we have social media algorithms that have created a multi-billion-dollar economy out of our anger, amplifying every conflict. Second, we have a genuine generational and ideological shift. There's a greater awareness of historical injustice and a new set of rules about how we talk about identity and power. For many, this is progress. For others, it's a terrifying loss of familiar norms. And finally, this confusion and conflict is being weaponized. Political actors and media figures deliberately stoke outrage to mobilize their base and demonize their opponents. The challenge we face isn't about stopping people from taking offense. That's impossible. The real challenge is learning to navigate our disagreements in a world that is more connected, more transparent, and more polarized than ever before. It requires us to distinguish between speech that causes genuine harm and ideas that simply make us uncomfortable. It means holding people accountable without resorting to digital mob justice, and it demands that we look past the outrage algorithm to find some semblance of common ground and shared humanity. Because if we don't, we're at risk of being permanently trapped in the outrage machine we've built for ourselves.